There's no hygiene involved. They can't throw anything away. But I think like there's this other extreme, the minimalism. And I don't really like that either, because I feel like that's encouraging people to get rid of everything. And if you listen to a minimalist sometimes, I think their advice can be bad, like, or not helpful to you, because I remember like I want to keep my weight a little bit lower, but I have to keep it down weight wise. And if I had thrown all my clothes away like 10 years ago that were practically brand new, or given them away, then I wouldn't have new clothes to wear after I lost weight, you know, or back and forth. So I kind of do keep some of my clothes that I like. If I really like a piece of clothing, I'm not going to be like, oh, I haven't worn it in 6 months, I'll never wear it again. I love fashion. Like, I don't keep everything, but I think about the things I do like. I like art supplies, I like books, and I like fashion, and I keep those things. So those are things I'm not going to get rid of, because if I like something, just because somebody made this magical rule about get rid of it after 6 months, I'm not going to do that. And I think it can cost you more money in the long run, because here you're giving away those things. And another thing, by the way, I just want to, from experience, people think, oh, they're being encouraged to get rid of all their books and to donate them to a public library or the Salvation Army. But can I tell you a little bit about the types of books that are donated that are sometimes not useful? Like, people will donate all their books and they think, oh, that we have a need for all these books. But just think about it. If there's a lot of popular paperbacks, there's going to be hundreds of people donating those same books, and a lot of them aren't in good condition, and they can't keep all those books. And even sometimes if they sell them in a bookstore at a library, the bookstore can't even sell them. Like, some of them are in such poor condition, you almost just are going to either need to keep them if you like them, or send them to a recycling center, because they end up throwing out a lot of books because they can't, like Goodwills, libraries, they can't utilize all those books people are donating. So yes, donate your books, but if you have, let's say you have nursing books from 1979, nobody has a use for those. Or if you have flight instruction books, like you might be interested in those books, or flight instruction books from, like, let's say 1980, like for historical purposes, you might have a purpose for those. But if you're donating them to like the Goodwill or to a library, they're not going to have a use for it. And I just can tell you that from experience. So flight instruction books, like you might be interested in those books for flight. So anyway, that's my take on it. So just because you're being encouraged to donate something, that doesn't mean the organization you're donating it to is even going to have a use for it. It may end up just being thrown away. So you have to take that into consideration too. If something's not really new or unique or in high demand and you donate that item, they might not even use it. Clothing's a little bit different. I know like they can utilize clothing more, but like when it comes to books, sometimes you might be better off keeping your books than donating your books.
Yes, I've certainly learned that myself when I tried to donate some of my own books to the libraries, and then I found out they threw them away.
Yeah, well, the reason is, it's not that they want to, but okay, there's lots of people donating books. And if it's a book that they aren't going to put on the shelf, then they have organizations like called Friends of the Library where they'll sell the book. And sometimes they can sell some of the books. But if, let's say, like somebody donated a whole bunch of like water stained books that are disintegrating, most people aren't going to want to buy those, and they'll give some of that away for free, but there's only so much. Like they just get so many donations after a while that sometimes they end up having to throw some things away, because they're really good. Like we're over here, like they do try to keep as much as they can and sell the things that they don't have use of in a library. But if it's in really poor condition and it's still readable to you, maybe you're better off keeping the book yourself, because you might appreciate the book more in the long run. But I guess it depends. Like, I understand wanting to declutter. I like to declutter too, but I just don't like the thing where they encourage people to get rid of all their books. Because you might actually have more of a use for that book later on than anybody else would, because it probably has more of a sentimental purpose or value or interest to you than giving it to somebody else.
Yeah, now that is certainly my experience, but what I thought we could talk about is why decluttering is a thing, and then why people declutter their memory so they intentionally forget certain things.
Oh, no, I don't like that. I think people have this thing called compartmentalization where they don't want to remember certain things, or they act like certain parts of their life can be forgotten. And I don't like that.
Yeah. I think this is where some of the things that I wrote in my commercial chastity little essay come into play. It's that there's only so much space in our lives for any person, anything, any idea. And when people are decluttering, they're not just throwing away junk. They're throwing away ideas. They're throwing away their attachment to certain things and ideas. And they are actually getting rid of friends too. I think that's what they're doing.
Okay. I mean, I think in life, yes, some friendships come and go. That's normal.
Yeah.
That happens.
All of that is normal. I mean, actually, it's kind of like if you think about a forest, a forest will grow thick and thick and thick and thick, and then a fire comes, and it's a natural thing. It's not necessarily, it might seem like a disaster to the animals who live in the forest, but
it triggers regrowth 100%. I can tell you that.
Yeah, but from the point of view of the planet or the forest or whatever, what's happening is it's being decluttered, and afterwards there's new growth.
I've seen it after a forest fire. Like it's amazing. Like there was this one area that they had bulldozed down after one fire, and they were using it to incinerate some of the dead trees, but then they left that area alone. And there was another fire that kind of came through there, and now like there's all this plant life and vegetation that's coming back. And there was a fire, like a couple forest fires near where my parents live, and it's amazing, like all these flowers, because the fire will basically, it encourages certain flowers to sprout again and come back. Not that fires they can be devastating to animals, and if you live near one, it's not fun, but it does encourage new plant growth. It's pretty amazing to see the cycle of life in a forest.
Yes. And a lot of people say it's the same way when we declutter our house. We might have a lot of things, many more things than we could ever make use of. And those things are collecting dust, and they're making it hard for us to find the things we really want to find. So after we declutter, there's actually sort of like a renaissance in our life sometimes where we rediscover hidden treasures. We rediscover things that we had that we didn't know that we had. So in that sense, there is definitely a movement afoot to declutter and even to minimize the amount of stuff that you have in your house. I, however, am not a minimalist. Are you?
No, because I feel like minimalism, I don't get it. Like, I'm not a hoarder, okay? But I feel like minimalism is this other extreme end of the spectrum. And I feel like right now, like, there can just be there should be some vulgarity. You should be able to be who you are without having to fit into one of these two extremes, because I feel like minimalism is the other extreme. Like, I've seen some minimalist videos where they take it really far, where they say, don't own furniture, only have a few outfits, bring all your cutlery with you everywhere, which could be kind of, I don't know, off-putting. Like, let's say you're going to a dinner party and you start taking out your own cutlery and you're like, well, I'm a zero waster. I don't believe in using, like, it's social situations. I think that could be very off-putting and just not always practical,
Yeah, okay. Well, those are the extreme wing of minimalism. Yeah. But I'm not even pretending to be a minimalist, even.
Oh, you're not. I think we're just people that sometimes declutter things, but that's different than being a minimalist.
Right, exactly. And I'll tell you the truth, I don't dislike the term hoarding. I have a problem with the idea that hoarding is necessarily bad, because after all, hoarding is just a negative connotation for saving.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if you're the sort of person who doesn't necessarily want to go out and purchase something new every day, then obviously you're going to save your old things to use, right?
Yeah, that I totally get. I guess my only negativity with hoarding is because I kind of associate it with people that keep like a lot of trash, like things that they should throw away, not necessarily things that they can use, but they're just keeping like everything. Like, but this is the extreme end of the branch. Like I'm talking about where you can't even walk in somebody's house because they have so many objects.
Yeah, I understand. But the reason I don't like that word, used in that way, is because it makes me think about the dragons who are supposed to hoard gold, you know?
Yeah.
And this is kind of an anti-savings kind of idea, because if you listen to some of what people say nowadays is don't save, experience, don't hoard things, but just go out and experience life and amass experiences. And that would be like saying don't keep a savings account, just make sure that you go and travel all the time.
That would be kind of pointless and impossible. How are you going to travel without money?
Well, I mean, some people do it. I'm not saying that I'm against those people.
No, if they want to do that, it's difficult. You have to, well, you could do it, but then you're going to have to do like a lot of little jobs. Like, I guess you could do like travel tourism kind of thing where you have a little job here and there, but it's a certain lifestyle for people at a certain age. Like it tends to be a younger group of people that are doing that, not people that are established, like past the age of 30. Like even these travel visa programs, like you can go to Australia, go to the US, vice versa, and get a travel work visa. But I think the cutoff is like 30, because that's kind of around the age that people are starting to become more established. And I'm not saying that there aren't people that backpack and live minimalistically traveling that way past that age, but it's more of like just a younger group of people that are doing that, it seems to me. I could be wrong.
Yeah. It's easier to do when you're younger, and it's harder to do when you're older. And it's not for everyone. Not everybody can feel safe without having a home.
Yeah, true. You know what I didn't like though too? There was this family, they were on Hub Pages, and it was the minimalist thing again. And this was a blog post on Hub Pages a few years back. They were saying how, well, you should only have this much underwear and you should only have like this many things. And it was really strange. And I thought it was kind of almost unhygienic, like, and unpractical what they were suggesting. And I thought that was strange. Like, okay, if you want to do that, that's fine. But I felt like they were kind of preaching that everybody should do that. And
yeah, that's the problem with people that have a philosophy. They think everybody should live a certain way. That might work for some people, but it does not work for other people at all. And I think we should respect the differences.
Yeah, sure.
But the other thing is, the people who say that you should recycle everything, don't take into account that the more you recycle, the less hygienic it's going to be.
I don't even feel guilty about not recycling anymore, because I did it for like a year and it was so hard. And I got barely, you end up having to pay, in California, you don't have a choice. You have to pay this thing called, You have to pay this thing called CRV, California Recycling Value, I think, where you have to pay like between 5 to 15 cents per bottle can. The bigger ones have a bigger charge, and you have to pay CRV no matter what. Like it's mandatory. This is like an extra tax that they put in to any bottled beverage that you buy in California. Like you don't have a choice. You can't opt out of it. And in the past, like we used to think, oh, recycling is great, until we looked at the bottle one day and we realized, well, basically you're just getting your money back, and then it's a lot of work, and you're just getting back the money that you had to pay. And then get this, they closed many of the recycling centers here recently. So even if you do want to recycle, it's almost like virtually impossible. But I decided I don't feel guilty about it anymore, because a lot of people are professional trash collectors in our complex, and they will scavenge anything out of the trash anyway. So I feel like if they want to do that, that's fine, and I don't feel guilty anymore throwing things away, because they do that all the time. And I'm like, if they want to scavenge that out of the trash, I'm okay with it.
Well, I mean, there used to be a deposit system with the glass bottles, and it made sense. I mean, it wasn't mandatory. It was just something where it paid for itself. Okay, so if you brought the bottle in, you got the deposit back, and it might not be you, it might be a child collecting bottles by the side of the road. And that child could make some money by bringing in the bottles. But
it's kind of the same thing here, but they break the glass ones. That was a thing that scared me. Like they would throw them back there and smash them.
oh,
And we would be like, oh my gosh, like you'd bring in the glass bottles and they'd go smash, 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 and they're smashing on the glass. And we asked them why. They go, that's how we recycle it. I'm like, what?
okay, see, they're not really recycling. Real recycling is where you get a second use out of something. And if you're just destroying the thing, you're not recycling it, and it's not going to save energy.
No.
You understand the whole point of any kind of economic system is that how much energy goes into something is eventually, determines what the price is. So, yeah, go ahead.
We have a really good episode about this, about how recycling is very hyped. Like, I don't like all their programs. Like, some of the stuff is just like whatever, but they tend to be more of the libertarian perspective. But they had a really good episode about just about how recycling is overhyped, and most of the things that we recycle really don't go for the intention that we think that they're going for, and it's not really as useful as we think.
Right. Because if it's not the free market, it's not going to be efficient. And if it's not efficient, it's not going to save energy.
Yeah, and it doesn't. And they were saying there's actually a big trash facility in Los Angeles that the actual trash generates energy. And they were talking about that in that same episode, which I thought was kind of interesting. So throwing things away was actually generating some sort of energy. I'd have to rewatch it. This was a few years back, but I just, it was another one of those things that popped up in my YouTube suggestions at the time. But I stopped recycling things because it was kind of disgusting. You'd go there and it smelled like urine.
Yeah.
It was horrible. And I think a lot of the homeless people, they were there, and I don't know what they were doing, but they would bring the bottles, and then people would just bring all their stuff, and it was really disgusting. You had to get the cans. Like, there was nobody to help you. You had to get these trash cans and pour everything in, and it was sticky. It was just gross. And I really was turned off by it. So now I don't feel guilty putting it in the dumpster. And I know and I've seen them, there's people, they come and they dig through the dumpsters. And if they want to do that and they make some money, I think they kind of do that as a side business. I don't care. Like, and I don't feel guilty. That's why I stopped feeling guilty about throwing things away, because I realized, well, okay, I threw away a broken and malfunctioning vacuum the other day, but I know that those people probably dug it out of the trash and they were able to do something with it, because I wasn't so inclined to go take it somewhere and get all the parts and sell them for money. I didn't want to do that. So if they want to do that, I was happy to let them have it.
Yeah. Yes, I agree with you totally about that. I mean, that's how scavengers in nature manage to recycle all the fruit that falls from the tree, and none of the animals eat it. Well, the tiny insects and the tiny scavengers, they take care of it, and nothing is eventually wasted.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's the thing about decluttering. People do it in order to bring new life into their houses and those things that they have, because after a while they realize that a lot of the things they spent money on and bought are actually making their lives miserable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the reason I say I don't like the word hoarding as a negative thing is because if you actually hoard something that's useful, for instance, you keep canned food in the house so that if there's a famine, you still have something to eat.
Oh,
That's not a bad thing.
yeah, I've always had like a food supply. Like we always have a lot of food in our house. Like those are things that my mom just growing up in the Midwest, well, she'll can some things that she brings to us because she's really into that. And I also just have some canned stuff that I've had and it keeps. So yeah, I'm totally into that. I totally agree with you there.
Yeah, but I mean, the same way we might keep gold, we might keep silver. These are things that if we needed to spend them, we could later, you know?
I was going to ask you about that because I know like when they took the US off the gold standard in the 30s, didn't a lot of people, they felt like they had to hide their gold? Because I remember there was this Unsolved Mysteries episode where these people went out and they hid their gold in the desert, but I guess the man who did it passed away and then they weren't able to find it later. So that kind of is in the same vein, right? This whole idea.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the time, FDR was telling people not to hoard gold. Why was he doing it? Not for a good reason.
No, not at all. And that's basically like you were taking people's property away or telling people that they couldn't own a certain type of property that would have value in the long term.
Right. Yeah. And they were saying you had to turn in all your gold and silver money and get paper money instead, so that you would have to be subject to whatever inflation the government imposed upon you.
Yeah, it was basically not wanting people to be self-sufficient, wanting people to be tied to the monetary system implemented by the government, which is not very secure or sound all the time. Another thing, like with credit cards, I feel like people are encouraged to get a credit card, like that thing you were talking about the other day, where they encourage people to go into debt to get a credit. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy, but that's what they've been doing. It started out with federal home loans, for instance, and then it went on to college loans.
Mm-hmm.
And the more of that there is, the more trouble there is in the home resale market, and the more trouble there is for people when they're just starting out in life, when they start out with debt and they're not supposed to. So basically, they're enslaved to that debt.
I feel like some of that kind of came into play with the whole Lori Loughlin thing, like the whole where they were bribing college administrators to get their children to school. But it turned out that some of their kids just wanted to do YouTube and weren't even that invested in going to a university. And it seems like now, like some young people are beginning to realize, not that there's nothing, it's wonderful to get an education if that's something that you want to do, but not everybody wants to go to college. Some people just want to start their own business. And I think that should be an option for young people rather than going into debt and taking out a student loan that may not pay off for them if they're not academically inclined that way.
Yeah, that's true. And my daughter is going to college, but she's also got a YouTube channel, and we'll see what will get her, further in life. You don't really have to choose, but I wouldn't go into debt in order to go to college,
No, you wouldn't, but a lot of people, that's the option that's being presented to them because they might be working, 40 hours a week. They don't have the funds. And then you have this is actually an issue, probably nationwide, but more so, I would say in California, where these aren't even really like rigorous universities. They're kind of like corporate universities. They're a weird combination where they have a college campus on what is essentially like a corporate office building that they bought, like National University, Phoenix Online. And they only teach a few courses, by the way, like education, business. They're not like a comprehensive university. They specialize in online, and they also they tend to cater to military people that move around a lot. But these universities are extremely expensive, which is fine, like if you're a private school, but they're not completely private. Like they're partially funded by the government. Like I just don't know how a university can be 100% private if it's receiving some federal funds. But I still think that's kind of a
that's how they're nationalizing everything, is by funding things and then saying, well, there are strings attached. So yeah, that's all part of that.
yeah.
So, but I have been decluttering my house, not from a minimalist perspective. And while I was doing that, it reminded me of something that happened in my life that was kind of painful for me. And it was if somebody discarded one of my books.
Aww.
So really one of the problems is that, you know, one man's treasure is enough is nothing to another person, you know. And sometimes people are just afraid to tell other people that they don't have room in their lives for their book or their ideas or whatever. But I mean, even the slogan, never forget, recently, you know, with a 9/11 situation, the fact that it was another anniversary of what happened. Some people had the slogan never forget, and other people said, why not? Why not forget? And I got the feeling they really wanted people to forget. Like this was taking up too much space in their mind, and they wanted people to forget that happened.
Yeah, they probably do. I've had people tell me that before, that they say, how do you keep all these ideas or thoughts in your mind? Like you're cluttering up your mind as if I'm like a computer and I can only have X amount of thoughts, but that's not true. I feel like I can take in more thoughts all the time. So I get tired of people that tell you that you have to forget something or not think about it, because then you're going to be cluttering up your mind and keeping new thoughts from coming in. But maybe some people are able to have old thoughts and new thoughts at the same time. I don't think you should forget something like 9/11, but another problem I've seen with 9/11 though is where it has become just the lifestyle that since 9/11 that we just have that more government surveillance is okay, and that we're so much more restrictive about who can come into the country because of one event. That's one of the drawbacks though. I guess I would like.
I mean, when I say never forget, I mean never forget also what happened as a result of it, and it's not okay.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm trying to say is, but some people think that's the new normal, and that's okay. That we're not going to question it. It's just okay. Let's go shopping, and that's another thing. Like, that's basically what they did right after 9/11. They're like, okay, here you go, people. Here are more tax refunds. You should go shop, or you should open a credit card and shop. Like, I feel like they were trying to distract us a little bit with that.
Well, I mean, actually, for a long time, it was difficult to be against the war that Bush started, as a supposed retaliation against 9/11. You know, and he said there were weapons of mass destruction where there were none.
Yeah.
And we're not supposed to forget that either. You know.
But now he's the good guy, and I guess like everything's forgotten, and Dick Cheney's kind of like a good guy now. Like, it's interesting. He's had this transformation, and people are like, well, Dick Cheney's not so bad because look who you have. I mean, it's just funny. Like, people that hated him now say he's not so bad. Or they've rewritten history. I don't know. People tend
Well, I mean, it's not that Obama was any better. It's just my point is that let's remember what happened. Let's remember 9/11. Let's remember what the reaction of the government was. Let's also remember that Obama ran against that and just kept that going once he was elected.
Oh yeah, he did so many drone attacks. I mean, you can't really say that he was anti-war. You can't really say that.
Yeah, yeah. But I think people think that their mind will be more clear if they forget the past.
Sad.
And that's why they also encourage us to throw away our old books and to, I don't know if you've heard about it, but a lot of new books are only in electronic form, especially textbooks.
Oh yeah, well, I've heard of that, and that's a problem too, because with a regular book, it's usually cheaper than sometimes the electronic one. Like some of the electronic popular books or textbooks in electronic format are not really that more affordable than the printed version of the book. And then if you go to like lending libraries, the digital publisher will only give so many copies that can be checked out over the lifetime of the book. But if you purchase a book or a book is donated to a library, that book can virtually be checked out for the whole life of the book, like however long that. Some books are like 50 years old in circulation, but a digital book sometimes only has like 6 to 8 lifetime checkouts allowed.
Wow.
Publisher. So they have to pool all their resources from many libraries. And the digital library, it's not that big, it's very tiny. People are surprised there's like a 6-month waiting list for a popular book on the digital library. You're better off just like buying your own version of the Kindle or Audible if you're going to read a popular book in digital format. But you'd be better off just buying the book.
Right. Yeah. So once you own a book, you actually own the book, and it's there in solid form, such as if you happen to have a book like this. But if you even if you buy a Kindle version for yourself, if you lend it to somebody else, do you still have it? How does that work?
I don't know. That's the thing. Like, I've never done that because I don't like digital books, and a lot of people I know still love books. Like where I live, the printed book is still really popular, and digital books are just not as popular, but we're kind of rare, I think, in our community. Like we really love printed books here. It's like a thing. I don't think it's like that most places. It's just it happens to be that the traditional printed book is just very popular. It's a very popular leisurely activity to read where I live.
Yeah.
I would say not. I don't know. Maybe, but I don't think in New York there's as many people that like printed books.
Really? Why do you think that?
I mean, I don't know. I don't live in New York, but my community, I feel like we're kind of rare that way because we like printed books, and other cities have shut down their bookstores and we still have bookstores. And we still have libraries that people go to check out books. It just, from what I've seen in California, maybe in New York, people still do love printed books. I could be wrong.
I would think that they would. I don't know. How about we open this up to the general public and see if we have any viewers, and they can tell us whether they prefer printed books or electronic versions.
Well, I won't give New York as an example, but I will give Los Angeles as an example, which I know verification because people come and tell me that. Like they'll say, well, in LA, there's not as many bookstores anymore. Like they don't even have a Barnes and Noble anymore. We still have a Barnes and Noble. Some cities don't have one anymore. Like they don't have like a place where you can buy physical books, except maybe at Target or Walmart. And I don't think a lot of people buy the physical books. This was just a few impressions from people. Like maybe there are a lot of like actual physical printed book lovers.
Around here, Springfield is the closest large city, and it does have a Barnes and Noble. It's just not in the mall anymore. It's got its own building, and it's got a Starbucks inside the Barnes and Noble, and then it's got a toy store hidden at the back of the Barnes and Noble, as if it were just like a secret. You were not supposed to know that they sell toys too.
Yeah, we have that too. But some cities, they had Barnes and Nobles, and they shut them down, or they had Borders, and They went
Well,
out,
Borders went out of business.
and
Yeah.
a lot of the small bookstores that were in our area, those went out of business. But I think we still have a few more bookstores. And just from what I'm hearing from people, like I'm looking right now to see if we have any comments.
Those went out of business. I think we.
Okay, let's see. I'm just giving you an idea of what people are telling me, and I don't go to every city to investigate to see.
Well, yeah, I have no idea. So I'm just asking. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the answer.
Well, and also too, just trend wise from what we're seeing, like, do you feel like people still love printed books as much as they did 25 years ago? I don't know. Like, just
I think people do love printed books. I think so, yeah. I just, a lot of the times they feel they can't afford them, or they feel that they have to get rid of them. You know, they have books lying around the house and the books are gathering dust and it's hard to clean. You know, look at my books. I've got too many of them. And now that I'm looking into cleaning and things of that sort, it's so hard the more of those that you have. And people are also starting to live in smaller and smaller spaces. I know that in China, for instance, you know, if you're in Shanghai, you can't really even afford an apartment. You might end up having to rent a little space to lie down at night. This is happening in Hong Kong too.
Oh, I've seen that, like in Hong Kong, where there were people that were living in cages, but the government was trying to say they didn't have to live there. It was an option, but that was the only place those people could afford to live.
Right. So under circumstances such as these, you can understand that people might discard books that they loved.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Just because they don't have the space for them.
Yeah, there's no space. If you're living in a big city, I think it would be, well, even New York, apartments are surreally expensive. Like, it's surreal that a little studio apartment can go for $5,000, and that's in more affordable areas. That's what I was hearing, that $5,000 a month, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, and here I am. I was wanting to rent out a whole house for $500, and I don't have anyone for it.
Oh my gosh, only $500. That's really good. I don't know how people can't afford that, but maybe it's just because of the cost of living differences, but it seems like 500 is very reasonable.
Yeah, but so okay, there are all these issues, and the thing is, you cannot offer a library a book that the library doesn't want, and you really can't afford to offer a human being a book that human being doesn't want. Do you remember when I gave Theodosia and the Pirates away? You know, a giveaway.
You did a giveaway, and would you say that you got reviews out of any of those ones that we gave away? Because I remember you had sent me a copy, and I even kind of did like a quasi giveaway on my blog, and I think I sent the second copy to someone, and I never heard back anything. And then another book, like a friend, you know, and I don't want to name names, was a teacher, and I said I thought she might like it in case there's a box, but I wish I would have kept that one for myself, because you had to send it to me again, because I never heard back. And she said she gave it to another teacher friend, but I didn't hear anything back, and I don't know. I really don't know. I was afraid to ask because she never said anything to me, so it made me feel kind of strange afterwards.
Yeah, I think that's why I'm not doing any more giveaways.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
Because I think that when people receive, you know, not you, but other people, when other people that we don't know or receive something for free, they're not going to value it as much as if they paid for it. You know what I'm saying?
When you have to spend your own money to buy something, you appreciate it far more than if it's that whole thing. well, like people think, oh, I'm donating money to the United Way, and they're doing all this to help children with their studies. But like I told you, like back when I used to teach in the school district, they didn't differentiate. Oh, are some kids needing school supplies more than others? Not that they should single out those families, but they just gave school supplies, like these school supply kits to these kids en masse, and they gave them these little dictionaries, and the kids just they took the whiteout in the school supply kit, and they started like whiting out the pages, highlighting things, ripping up, and they were just playing with it like it was a toy. They didn't take it seriously, which and like one teacher said, well, that really makes me want to donate money to the United Way now when I see the way that they spent that. Like, if a charity wants to help a family, I could totally see, but why didn't they just offer like some sort of financial assistance to a family that might have needed it, as opposed to, let's just give some school supplies to all these kids. And the kids that ruined it, by the way, they weren't kids that were destitute or in need of things. It was kids that they went out to India to get their nails done. They just were playing with it because they thought it was a toy. And I didn't want to give it to them, but I had to, because we were told you have to give this school supply kit to all the kids. Like, you didn't have a choice. It was wheeled in, and you were saying, here you go, you have to give this to them. And it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, that's why free market works, because free market actually, the supply and demand thing evens itself out. And if somebody doesn't really want something, they won't go to the trouble of getting it. And those who go to the trouble of getting something will actually appreciate it because of the trouble they went to get it.
Yeah. And then at the end of the day, if somebody wants to be a charity and they want to help a family in need, that's different. I don't have a problem with that. But it was the way that it was done. It was told that we had to do it. It wasn't like where they just set aside these funds and ask, like, is there a family in town who might actually legitimately, I don't know, what, help buying books. It wasn't anything like that. Like, in fact, I think back in the day when my grandmother, back when they used to have to buy textbooks, the kids actually treasured them. Like, when you had to buy your own textbook, the kids took very good care of them. It was something that they had pride in. Whereas now, like, when you just give a textbook to the kids, they would just kind of throw them around or mark them up, and they didn't care because their parents that have to pay for that, they don't care.
Exactly. And by the way, when people used to have to buy textbooks, they also took care of them, because if they didn't want to keep the textbook, they might be able to resell it. And the better care they took of it, the better a price they would get for it on reselling it.
You know, I used to do that in college, but I found out later on with the internet is you can resell the textbooks yourself and make more money, because I would sell them back to the bookstore and they didn't give me very much money. And I guess I had wished I had researched a little bit more on the internet at that time, because the internet was around in the late 90s, but I didn't realize, oh, you could sell your textbooks on the internet. But I actually made back a lot of money just selling old textbooks that I didn't want. These were ones that I didn't have a use for, and I was able to sell them. And that was almost better than donating a book, in my opinion. Got some money out of it.
Yeah. So as I was, as I am cleaning up around here and trying to declutter, and I'm not throwing away books, but I'm throwing away other things that I thought were of value at the time when I got them. And it kind of hurts me to have to throw some of those things away, but that's life. There's only so much space. And after you've been living in a house for 18 years, you realize that you can't keep everything that you have if you're going to have, a nice space to live in. So I'm doing that. I'm decluttering. And as I was doing that, it reminded me of my friend. And I suddenly realized why she had thrown away my manuscript.
Aww.
So this is years and years and years ago, back in '93, when I finished writing Vacuum County. I had like two best friends, and I gave each of them a copy of the manuscript. And, it was in one of those Kinko boxes where I printed it, and then I made a copy for each of them. And I made a copy for each of the publishers that I was sending it to. And So I gave her that box, and I was expecting to hear from her, what she thought, because she was my friend. And this was a very big deal to me. And she told me that she hadn't read it yet. So I thought, okay, I don't want to pressure her. So I won't ask. I'll just wait for her to tell me when she read it. And, months went by and years went by, and I hadn't let it go. I was just in my mind, I wonder when she'll tell me that she read it.
Mm-hmm.
And she was telling me during those years that she was decluttering her house. And of course, I didn't realize what was going on with her. She was about 9 years older than me, and she'd been living in the same house for years and years. So I do understand that she had to go through that much earlier than I did. I was still cluttering up with everything. I was holding on to every single thing I had. But she didn't tell me anything except that she had a friend who was helping her declutter, because she was the type of person that if she decided she needed to do something, she never trusted herself to figure out how to do it. So she got somebody who was an expert in that field to help her with that. Okay, one of her other friends. Well, I figure that one of her friends told her which pile to throw out and which pile to keep. And my book was in the pile to throw out. Well, 20 years passed. And of course, I was working on other books and so on and so forth. And one day she told me, this was such a long time ago, but I threw out your book. But you understand, don't you? Because that was what she always said whenever she told me some bad news. She would always say, "Oh, you understand, right?" And I always felt I couldn't say that I didn't understand, but I didn't understand. And after, I didn't immediately end the friendship, but shortly after that, I realized she's not my friend, and
Wow.
Anyway, that can happen between writers and non-writers, I guess, where they don't realize this is a very big deal.
Yeah, it definitely can. But I also think, just the thought was, if you kind of thought you weren't going to read something, just be honest or give it back. Like, don't throw it away. Like, to me, that's just kind of.
Yeah, it was wasteful, because I was at that time, this is a long time ago. It's more than 20 years ago now, but at the time, when she told me that, it was 20 years. At the time when I gave it to her, I made a special copy for her while I was sending it off to publishers, and every time I sent it to a publisher, of course, the publishers never returned it either. So that was a manuscript that I could have sent to a publisher.
Yeah. And it's money that you spent and time that you spent printing that up. Like, to me, if somebody sent me a manuscript like that and I knew I might not read it, I think I would be honest. I'd be like, I know that you spent time printing that, and I would like you to have it back. And it's not that it's not good. I'd be honest. Like, I feel like honesty is lacking a lot in this lifetime, which to me, like, people are like, oh, this is just so much more polite, like, just to take something and not say anything. But I feel like it's more impolite to take something, pretend you're going to read it, and then years later be like, well, I threw it away, but you understand, right? I mean, it's just, it's kind of disrespectful.
Yeah. But this created another thing that happened to me. So this happened to me with Theodosia and the Pirates. Mm-hmm. So, and in this case, it wasn't, you might think, okay, a manuscript really takes a lot of space. And even a printed book takes a lot of space. And people throw away their books, they throw away pieces of paper, and so on and so forth. So to a different friend, I sent just an attachment on email, an attachment which was a PDF of the book, Theodosia and the Pirates. And come to find out, this person deleted it. And it's not as big a deal because when you delete it, I could send you another one or another one or another one to this person. But so I very jokingly said, I told this person the story about the thrown away book. And I said, that's okay. I'll give you another 30 years. I won't be mad at you now. But if I find out 30 years from now that you still hadn't read it and that you discarded the manuscript, I might not want to be friends with you anymore. That was a joke, okay? You understand?
I got it. It's funny.
Yeah. So the next thing he did was he bought a paper copy and he wrote a bad review.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So this is all related to decluttering, throwing away books, and ultimately even, I think, burning books.
Oh, yes. It kind of correlates, doesn't it? Not.
Right. So right now they're telling us we should throw away our books. We should replace them with electronic versions of the book, which, by the way, can be altered while, they can be altered at any moment without our knowing it.
Definitely. And I think that's the electronic textbook. They're going to love that because they can just alter it on the fly, right?
Right. And they want us to forget. Whenever something unpleasant happens, they want us to forget because they think that if we don't forget, that will engender hatred.
This was one thing. I mean, I can't verify this, but somebody that my mom was working with, she's now retired, said that they decided to homeschool. Well, in California, you have to do a charter school, I think, if you're going to do like a quasi homeschool. But they said because when they were looking at some of the Common Core curriculum, they didn't even really teach about the founding fathers anymore, like at the elementary level. They were teaching about alternate history, which I thought was kind of strange because we did have a constitution, we had founding fathers, but they were like intentionally not teaching about George Washington because they said since he was a slave owner, we really shouldn't learn about him. So what are they trying to say? Like they're trying to alter our history and say that we don't have a constitution, and they don't want to acknowledge like the people who wrote the Constitution, the first president of the United States. I mean, this is our history. And then, okay, same thing with what Thomas Jefferson University. I heard you can't write papers about him or do research. I mean, I don't remember what exactly it was about him, but the university.
Well, he was also a slaveholder and he had a slave mistress. So what? And
now I think like at that particular university, which was named after him, and he was a big proponent of education, by the way, love him or hate him. Now you're not supposed to do research about him, or you're not supposed to mention him. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it just was so contradictory. Like basically what it is they don't want you to study about the founding fathers anymore because they were men.
Because they were men and they were slaveholders. I've even had, and I'm not a big Thomas Jefferson fan, and I don't mind talking about the fact that what he did with the slaves and all, and that he promised his mistress that he would set her free, and he never did.
No, I'm not a
all of those things. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't know what he wrote or pay attention to what he did.
It's kind of scary though. That's an altering of history that they want to.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the fact of the matter is that Aaron Burr, it's not like he didn't have any slaves. He actually believed in setting them free. Mm-hmm. He was an abolitionist. He did believe in that. But like all people of that time, he wasn't perfect. And he did have slaves, but you know what? He paid for their education. He wanted them to learn how to read and write. He was always improving the minds of all the people around him and very respectful. And the difference between Aaron Burr and Thomas Jefferson with regard to slaves is Thomas Jefferson actually wrote against the intelligence of Black people. And we should keep those writings and we should keep that in mind.
Yes, we know that about him. Like he had a lot of shortcomings for sure. I mean, but just to say that we're not going to study about any.
No, we should study the truth. We should absolutely study everything.
I mean, it's scary to me that we're saying we shouldn't study history. I'm appalled by that.
There are actually people who speak against the Constitution because guess what? Slavery was mentioned in the Constitution. And so we should just discard the Constitution because of that?
Yeah, that's so strange. Also, another thing, when I was in downtown Riverside, look, I know UC Riverside was the liberal school that I went to, and that's nice that they have a Gandhi statue. I mean, it's wonderful and all that, but I started thinking about how, well, Gandhi's not really a local person, and
No.
They don't really want us to have like statues of local historical people any longer, unless they're maybe a woman or I don't know, somebody. Look,
yeah,
I'm of mixed heritage. I'm not even all white. I don't care. Like why is it we can't have a statue of like somebody that was a founding father? Like, that I think that was another thing. They didn't want to have Thomas Jefferson statues on Thomas Jefferson University. I think I remember hearing about that too. But here, like even locally, like I don't think that they would have statues of local people anymore. It seems like now they're having statues of Gandhi, and it was taught, and it's a nice statue. It's beautiful and everything, but it was Tata Consulting Agency that donated it, and I was just trying to figure out like why we have a statue of that in downtown Riverside, but not of a local person. I guess that's just one thing I thought was kind of interesting the other day.
Yeah, I actually, I know this is probably way off topic, but that made me think about the biblical prohibitions against making statues of gods. I'm thinking that now I'm getting an insight suddenly into why there was that prohibition. And it probably had something to do with a change in the culture. So at one point, all the gods had statues. Mm-hmm. And as they were moving from polytheism to monotheism, they suddenly forbade that. Mm-hmm. And I think something of a similar nature, right now we're having some kind of a shift in what we're allowed to think and what we're allowed to know. And so this forbidding of statues has something to do with that. Because otherwise, why would you even care about this statue or that statue or some person from the Confederacy? I mean, how would that hurt anybody?
I don't even think, and Robert E. Lee didn't even like his own statues. So, like, who cares? If you wanted the truth and you did some research about it. But I don't know why the statue had to be removed. It was just it's a historical statue. I think it's wrong to remove. If you want to add more statues, that's one thing. But I don't think we should take down statues.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. So I mean, I'm all for moving forward and learning new things, but I don't want to throw away my old books, and I don't want to forget my old memories either. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. This might be a little weird of me, but that's why I don't throw away my old laptops either.
It's probably better not to. I still have my old laptop. I can't get it to restart, but it could be a data security breach, I think. And this is one thing I recycled one, but I decided to never do it again because all my information is on that laptop and I can't get it to restart, quite literally. But there are computer experts. They can do things. So I don't even think I would give away that laptop because somebody, if you had some sort of information that you didn't want, like financial or any kind of information, I just wouldn't give it away. Like I kept the base of it because I'm going to keep it for that reason.
Yeah, no, and definitely if you have your hard drive, if you can somehow get to the information in your hard drive, there could be correspondence, there could be letters, there could be manuscripts that you might want to keep. Or even pictures. Pictures could be there.
I know, like I'm better at technology now. I probably can figure out how to fix my computer now. Like I have more inclination to do it, and I might one of these days in the future. I keep it because
Yeah.
way.
Right. So I'm very, very leery of anybody saying don't hoard or forget everything that's unpleasant that's ever happened to you. That doesn't mean that I don't believe in moving forward, but I think we can't really move forward. We're going to go in circles unless we keep the old information.
Well, I was told like right after this weird experience happened with that person that I met. Well, that I know, but they told me just forget about it, don't think about it, and I thought that was kind of strange. Like I was told just pretend it didn't happen, you'll be okay. But that didn't really work for me. Like I couldn't just pretend it didn't happen because I was a person all the time. But I guess the only thing I am trying now recently is just to never talk to that person anymore. And that seems to be working the last few weeks, actually. I just don't talk to them, but I can't forget. But I guess other people can. They just forget things and that works for them, but that doesn't work for me.
Yeah. It doesn't, the idea that you can just forget anything is ridiculous. You don't have to address it all the time. You don't have to deal with it all the time, but it's a part of your life. It's something that happened. And in order to be an integrated full person, you can't fake reality. And that's actually something that Ayn Rand said.
Oh, wow. See, that I like that she said that and acknowledged that. She seems much more practical, realistic than a lot of these people are like, just forget about it. I don't know. I think you forget about it and then you're going to remember later. And then if you just can move on from it, but not forget, if that makes any sense. I don't know. Memories that aren't good.
Yeah, if you read The Fountainhead, there's another person. There's a person named Katie, and she actually, I mean, she was in love and then she lost her love, and she actually managed to brainwash herself into not remember any of the feelings anymore, but that made her into a zombie. So you don't want to be a zombie, right?
That's another thing I would like to talk about maybe eventually. I think right now I feel like they encourage, it's not exactly book related, but it is. But right now it seems like they encourage people to take mental medicines to deal with, like, okay, I guess in some cases I can see people might need it, but it scares me because this will kind of turn people into like zombies. They'll say like a zombie like state. And I find that a little scary because do we know the long-term effects of all these things that they prescribe? We don't, I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's definitely true. And a lot of the people who end up doing those mass shootings are medicated.
Yeah, they are, but we're not supposed to talk about that. Anyway, I know that's a different topic. Like, I don't want to get off minimalism or decluttering too much, but I think you should keep things that you hold of value and you shouldn't get rid of them just because someone else says you should. And who is it that decides that someone is a minimalist decluttering expert? How do you become an expert in that topic?
I don't know, but
no, like, do you like, what is is there like now a certification for that?
I don't know. There's a Japanese woman, her name is Marie Kondo.
Oh, yes.
And so she's definitely an expert, and she even has a show that I saw on Netflix in which she goes to different people's houses in the US. She's Japanese, but she goes to people in the US and she helps them decide which things to throw away and which things to keep. But before that even, my friend who threw away my manuscript had a friend of hers who was better at decluttering than she was, and she considered her the local expert on decluttering, and she had her help her do the decluttering. So right now I have decluttered my bedroom, not the whole house, but just my bedroom, because I do have some allergies and I want So I made it pretty much dust proof, and I've removed all of the books from there. I used to have lots and lots of books and bookshelves in my bedroom. I don't have that there. But I don't want to do that to the whole house.
No, definitely not. And you can have a big book collection. You just what you can like you can dust them, and it's not. There's ways you can do it that work. If you want to dust.
Yeah, but the more books you have, the more you dust. And what I've noticed about really neat people, and I've never been a neat person, but really neat people have a lot fewer knickknacks. They have a lot fewer things in their house. And the reason that motivates them to keep everything decluttered is actually because they do dust. And the more knickknacks and the more small things you have, then the harder it is to dust. So they made their lives easier by decluttering first, and then dusting becomes easy.
Yeah, it takes like a whole day if you have a lot of knickknacks to dust.
Yeah, right. So I don't know. I'm trying to find a balance, but I'm never going to be a minimalist.
I'm not either, and I don't want to get rid of all my knickknacks. And like, I know like I could dust once a week, but I hate dusting. Like, it's so boring. Like, okay, it's not that I don't want to do it, but I don't want to dust like once a week. Like, really? Like, ugh, no.
What would happens with me with books is if I pick up a book to dust it, I'll start reading it, and then I won't be dusting.
That's actually what happened every time when I would do those Instagram pictures. Like, look at me, I'm like cleaning, and then 7 hours later, I'm looking at stuff.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't know what to say. I suppose there is something wrong with me. And I think, when there were people who had either maids or there were men who had wives who cleaned for them, you know, uh, then there would be one person who was constantly cleaning and another person who was constantly accumulating stuff, to be clean. But in my household, I'm the person who does it all. So
Yeah, that's kind of like, well, for me too. Like, if I want certain things clean, I have to do that. So I
yeah,
get it. I mean, it's a little hard. But even now, like I know people like I don't get it. Like, oh, their husband will go shopping for them. Their husband will do all this for them, and I'm like, well, that must be nice. Like, and in some ways, it's easier for them because their husband and they take turns, and that makes life kind of easier. And when it's just you doing everything, it's a little bit more work. People don't realize it might just be one person, but it's actually more work because you're doing twice as much as one person. In a way, I think.
well, I'm not sure because when there are two people, I guess there's also more work. So when they divide it by two, because you have to take care of two people instead of one person. So
Yeah, I
when they
guess.
divide it by two, I don't know what happens.
Well, it seems like to me things can be easier in some areas, maybe not all. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's different. It really depends on whether one of the people is dedicated to doing all the house cleaning and all of the routine kind of things, while the other person is dedicated to going out and earning a living or working or whatever. Um, then there's some kind of a savings, I think, from the fact that people specialize. But in today's uh, marriages and living arrangements, a lot of times they don't specialize and they'll say, oh, I'll clean this week, you clean next week. And so it doesn't end up saving much.
No, I don't know. And sometimes it's a lie that a two income household is better financially. Like if one person stays home, it's actually better financially because the person that's working, they might just be tempted to spend a lot of their earnings on different things that they wouldn't be spending it on if they weren't outside of the house all the time. And I know it's just true for me. Like when I'm out, like I'm trying to be good now and less tempted to like eat out or buy, to make food in advance. But that's kind of tricky for me, and people don't understand, but because I have to prepare everything in advance. And I'm sorry, I guess some people are experts at doing everything they want to do, but I actually want to work on hobbies on the side too. I just don't always want to be doing food preparation.
Yeah, yeah, I understand. I think back in the day when, men had their traditional roles and women had their traditional roles, if a husband worked outside the home, uh, he might come home for lunch. He might live very close to his job, and he might actually come home for lunch,
Mm-hmm.
so he wouldn't have to eat out, um, and they would save money that way.
See, I think that's nice. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Like, and you end up paying more tax in a way as a two-income couple too, in general, and then childcare. And there's all these hidden costs that we don't really talk about. But I'm getting off topic. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I mean, I agree with you. It's true. What you just said is true.
But anyway, I mean, I think decluttering is fine, but it should be a personal issue. Preference. It shouldn't be that you're doing it because someone's saying you should get rid of this, this, and this if you think later you might use it. That's all.
Right. Yeah. And I think we should all be a little bit wary of the idea of decluttering our minds from excess information. I don't think we should do that.
I've never been a proponent of that. People get mad at me because I don't do that.
Right. People will say, why do you still remember that? Forget that. And I go, well, it happened, so I remember it.
My favorite thing is people who remember everything and like to talk about things and have those memories, and like just I'll be thinking about something and this memory comes back, and I like people who think that way. Like, it's amazing. I wouldn't want to be one of these people that try to suppress every memory, because I think they still remember, they just pretend not to, and that can be weirder as well. That can be kind of strange too, because sometimes people say things and they kind of drop a hint that they remembered something that they pretend to forget. And it's just kind of awkward because like they're pretending, like everybody is agreeing to pretend something didn't happen, but we all know it happened, It's kind
of, there is a kind of inconsistency in people forgetting something and remembering it at the same time. And I don't understand how they do that.
I think that some people, they're trying to suppress it because society says, well, you should just not remember these bad memories. You should just forget about them and just go on with your life. And so they'll pretend like, oh, that they don't remember. Like, even as a group, I've seen people do this. Like, they kind of pretend, oh, that we don't remember this. But then things will pop up, or they'll say something, or they'll do something that lets you know subconsciously they do remember, but they just don't want to say it out loud. It's like some sort of weird consensus to have selective amnesia, and it's strange. Like, why? Just acknowledge it, and that's fine.
Right.
I'm not saying you have to marinate in these bad memories, but
Sure, of course not. You don't have to. And sometimes, but if you rise above a bad memory, you say, okay, that happened, I didn't like it, and I'm moving forward. You feel a lot better than if you pretend it never happened.
Oh, I think so, definitely. And then sometimes too, an experience can be really good, because then you're like, well, now I know, like, I don't like that, or I don't like this particular person, and I won't wonder anymore. Like, I'll never be curious. Like, to me, it might be a bad experience, but it's actually a positive thing in a way, because now like, you don't like this certain thing, or that experience wasn't good, and you have that knowledge, and you no longer are curious. So it's actually kind of a good thing in a way. I don't know.
Right. Yeah.
Well, as an example, it's a funny example, because I had liked this person in a way for a few years, and I had thought, oh, they were like this really sweet, caring person, and I was kind of attracted to this person. But then once I got to know them, it wasn't the case. And then now I know, and it was actually a good thing, because it kind of got me out of this, like, kind of being a little bit like having sweet feelings for this person, which is so much better, because now I can just, it's not that I'm going to pretend this person doesn't exist. I just don't have to acknowledge this person. And that's much healthier than like pretending it didn't happen. I just don't feel like I need to talk to that person anymore.
Yeah, no, it's okay. And you can acknowledge that you have a history with someone. You can acknowledge even the nice things that person may have done, because it's not like every person is just good or just bad. So you can acknowledge even the good things about them, but say, okay, but it's over and it's not for me.
Yeah, no, definitely not. But anyway, so that's just an example, I guess. I'm trying to think of ways like people suppress memories. I don't personally, I never have. I don't see the point. It seems kind of fake in a way.
Yeah. And I don't know. I do know some people who do seem to forget a lot. Like they'll read a book and they won't remember what was in it. And I don't really understand how that happens either.
I don't know. I feel like you didn't really absorb the book. You were just speed reading it, maybe skipping pages, like looking at the words, but not really thinking about them. I don't really see how you read the book then.
Well, but sometimes you have conversations with people and it's the same thing. They don't seem to have absorbed what it is that you said. Like that friend of mine who threw away my manuscript. Well, sometimes it felt like she had thrown away every conversation we had. And so, like, I remember one time I said to her, I'm interested in politics, but of course I can't run for president. And she said, well, why can't you run for president? And I said, well, because I was born in Israel.
Oh my
and,
goodness.
and she somehow, I mean, obviously I told her a million times I was born in Israel.
Yeah, that's a big
I told
thing.
her about my childhood and everything. And
That's
somehow she couldn't remember that. Isn't that weird?
That's very strange because to me that's a very salient point. Like I just remember reading, like, oh, you said you were born in Israel and you'd gone to school here and there, and like to me that always was something that stood out. Like I remember if somebody says they're not born here, or they're born somewhere else, or they're born in a different state. Like to me that's kind of a basic thing. Like it's not something that you easily forget. Like, oh, they said they like that movie. It's not a small detail. It's kind of a big detail to forget. Maybe they want. I almost think people want to have friends, but they don't really want to listen to them. They just want somebody that will listen to them. Like they just want a person that keeps them company, and they're not really listening to you. I had a friend like that, by the way, but she was so blatant about it. She say things like, not to change the subject, but she didn't want to listen to anything I had to say.
Huh.
Every time. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically when she said not to change the subject, she was changing the subject.
And every time, and it was always when it came back to me. And I actually, when I stopped being friends with her, it was a very interesting time period because she decided that she was going to leave her husband, which, it's fine. But then she just decided, I guess, that she didn't like me anymore because I said, I shouldn't have told her this, but I just noticed something that when I had a gift certificate to the Olive Garden and she came down here so we could go use it. But then she never wanted to meet up or do things other times because she was always too busy, but she didn't seem too busy when I had the gift certificate.
Yeah.
And not that it's a big thing, but my mom had given me the gift certificate. And I guess she was kind of upset that I used it with her, even though nobody else I knew really liked the Olive Garden. Okay. So we went, but she was just kind of disappointed, I guess. And it was just the fact that she acted like it was no big deal. And I don't know, it was just very strange. Like it was, but she never had time for me. And then when I made the comment to her, she goes, oh, like you need to cool it. You're being too dramatic. Like, and I should have just kept it to myself because I knew that's where our friendship was kind of heading. Like I served a purpose for her when she was married to this person. She didn't feel like much was going on in her life and she wanted to talk to me. But then once she left him, she just wanted me to be there. She wanted to talk to me. But I learned the lesson. You can't tell people that. Like you should never, but we were supposed to be best friends, Aya, okay? Like supposedly best friends that could tell each other everything. But I just told her it hurt my feelings. But then when I said that, she said I was being too dramatic and she never talked to me again. And I even tried to send her like a Christmas card, like electronically. And I saw that she opened it because it said she opened it, but she never She never got back to me. She just cut me out of her life. But she did the same thing to her ex-husband. Like, she left him and didn't say anything to him about it. Like, there was no discussion. She just left. So I realized, well, she can do that. And it kind of hurt my feelings at the time, but now I realize, oh, she wasn't my friend really, because every time we were together talking, it was always supposed to be about her. But if it wasn't about her for a minute, she didn't really listen. She'd be like, what? Oh, I don't remember that. Oh, I kind of block people out and just nod is what she told me sometimes. So she's an extreme example, but I think a lot of people do that. I think they just want to be friends with someone, to have a conversation, but they don't really want to listen to what that person's saying.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, sometimes it's hard to tell whether somebody forgot something you told them or were they just not listening in the first place.
With your one friend, if she didn't remember that you were born in Israel, that's kind of extreme case scenario. Wow. I don't know. Unless she's just that forgetful, but that's a big detail to me.
Okay, I'll tell you what else happens when I tell somebody that I'm from Israel. A lot of times in their mind, they don't have a category for Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and they decide that I'm Jewish, which I'm not.
No.
And then they put me in the Jewish category. And of course, somebody who's Jewish can run for president, you know, so then they forget, you know what I'm saying? So I'm not sure.
They don't realize born here, I guess.
Yeah, so people only remember what they have a slot for. And it's really interesting in terms of cognition, the way people's minds are made. And this kind of brings me to another topic. I'll do it briefly because I know we've been going a really long time, but I assumed that to be a sort of native speaker of English, to have the ability to be a native speaker of English, I needed to know what English speakers know about the language, which I think I do. Because I can pass for a native speaker of English, even though it was not my first language. But then when I went and I studied linguistics, they told me that native speakers of English don't know certain things. And if I know them, then I can't be a native speaker.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, like things like that heel and health and rooster and roost are related to each other, that those are roots. They say, well, a linguist will know that, but a native speaker of English wouldn't know that.
Okay, so I see what you're saying. Like somebody just in the general population, they're not going to know the root of roosting and a rooster, and that came from that root. Okay.
But you see, in Hebrew, if you're a native speaker of Hebrew, you know some things about roots, and you know to look for roots, because in Hebrew, the roots are very consistent. So even if nobody ever taught you what the root of a particular word is, you can figure it out for yourself because of the consistency of the entire root system. It's like that in most Semitic languages. So coming into English as a native speaker of Hebrew, I always looked for the roots of words. So I knew things, I started speaking English when I was 6, and I can pass for a native English speaker, but I know things about English that native speakers who are monolingual would not normally know.
No, you're more, I think you have a stronger knowledge of language composition because of that root word knowledge from Hebrew, but also you have an interest in like an ability to absorb languages. And some people that speak English natively, they don't have that ability to pick up second languages.
Right. And some of it may be an individual thing, individual difference between one person and another. And some of it might be the background. But it really floored me when there was an implication that if I wanted to be good enough to be a native English speaker, I needed to forget some things that I know about language.
No, I don't think that. I think just to be a good speaker of any language, you just have to learn the language, observe how people speak it, but you can learn whatever you want about the language. If you want to be a linguist and have a linguistic background and more knowledge of the language, that's fine. If you want to go backpacking in Europe and you just want to learn how to speak like a colloquial version of French just to get by when you're going to cafes, that might work for you. But if you want to have more of an academic linguistic background of a language, that doesn't mean you can't be a native, like on the same par as a native speaker, you know. A lot of people that come here as teenagers speak English. Like there was this lady, I would not have known that she wasn't born here, but she was from Nicaragua and she learned to speak English when she was 15, but she spoke it flawlessly, like without an accent. And she seemed like, I don't know, she almost seemed like a Valley girl, really, like the way she would act, like she adapted to American culture very seamlessly. And when she told me that her family had escaped the revolution in Nicaragua, I never would have known that because of the way she spoke English. And same with like Cenk Uygur. I think he was 8 or 9 when he came to the United States. His dad had studied in the US. He may have had some passing knowledge of the English language, but I don't think he really learned it until he was like a teenager, like around 11, well, preteen, 11 or so. And he adapted to English very quickly and became very Americanized and very interested in the American political system to the point where he's kind of, I don't agree with all his political views, but he used to be a Republican. He's kind of an interesting guy, like interesting background, but he adapted to American culture very quickly and learned to speak the language after the age of 8. I think he didn't become competent in English until he was 11, he said. But you wouldn't know that now listening to him. He sounds like a native speaker. You sound like a native speaker. My friend who came here when she was 2, she didn't speak English until she was 5 or 6 when she went to kindergarten. My grandpa didn't speak English until he was 5 when he went to kindergarten because his mom spoke Arabic. So a lot of people learn English when they go to school.
Sure, absolutely. My point was just about linguists. Linguists tended to have,
and they say
they think that they know not just what a native English speaker knows, but what he doesn't know. And if you happen to know this, not from your linguistic training, but you've always known this, then you don't have the mind of a native speaker. That was their point.
That's strange, but why did they determine that? That sounds like just an opinion, not a fact.
Well, it's definitely an opinion, but it's almost as if they're testing you, not based on your knowledge, but based on you should be ignorant about this. If you're not ignorant about this, you're not a native speaker. And that goes along with the idea that it's not enough that you learn the language, you have to forget your old language.
It's kind of the whole assimilation thing where they...
Yes, absolutely.
But you should be able to have knowledge of your native language, or if you want to continue to speak both, that's fine. And knowing the roots and root knowledge of a language is actually beneficial, I think, more than unbeneficial in a lot of ways.
Right. But I mean, the reason I threw this into this particular live stream is because so many people put such a high value on forgetting. They don't think it's enough to learn something. When you go to college, they want you to forget everything you knew beforehand that disagrees with what the professor is teaching. You see what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying. I had professors that were kind of like that, where they wanted you to really, I don't know, parrot their world view, it seemed. But the good ones were like, no, you can disagree with me. You should do your own research. I think that's better. I don't know now, though, like in a history program now, I wonder, like, the impression I get, like, I feel like you kind of do need to maybe parrot the professor's viewpoint in order to get a passing grade, which that's the impression I get from some history degree programs these days, which is not a good one, to be honest with you.
Right. So I think what we need to keep in mind is not to throw out the good with the bad, and not to forget just in order to try to make our lives easier, because sometimes remembering things is the most important thing in the world.
you should remember everything that you can. And I think many people do remember things unless they're just really forgetful or depressing a lot of memories.
Yeah. Right. So do we have any viewers and do we have any comments?
Let me see. I'm checking. I'm gonna hit refresh just to make sure. All right, so let's see. I don't see any comments at the moment.
Okay. All right. Well, I just wanted to make sure. But in any event, if anybody later on has some ideas about decluttering either of your house or your mind, and how that relates to both paper books and electronic ones, please leave us a comment. And Julia, I will be speaking to you again very soon at one of our next live streams.
Yep, I'm excited, and we have Kate Gladstone on Friday on your main channel, so that'll be interesting with the handwriting.
Yes, yes, and I have a feeling that Kate remembers everything.
Oh, Kate's I love her memory. I would love to, like, if she was in a room, you could just probably ask her what happened in 1973, and she probably could tell you. Like on a
Yes, I think so. I think so. I like that about her. So have a wonderful day, and I'll see you again very soon.
Okay, have a wonderful day, Aya.
Bye.
Bye.